Hello everybody and welcome to Nathan on Shuffle. Today I've got another interesting spotlight for you guys of a new album that just came out. Usually I try to keep these to about one a week, but this was so special I kind of am doing a double dose this week. If you haven't seen it yet, check out my Star 1 Revel in Time review. Did that a couple days ago. That should be up. Please check that one out. Another great album that you can check out from that video. But here we're about to talk about another big prog release that came out this last week. And it's also a great one, and this is Jonas Lindberg and The Other Side and the album Miles from Nowhere. So this is more maybe of an obscure pick. At least it's a group that I was unaware of until this album was being talked about in the press, and I've seen different reviews pop up that piqued my interest, to say the least. And so I've been really interested to listen to this one and give my thoughts about it. So Jonas Lindberg is a somewhat new artist. He released some EPs back in 2012 and 2013 was kind of his start, In Secret Pace and The Other Side. And the first full-length came out in 2016 called Pathfinder, where it was an official Jonas Lindberg and The Other Side release. But this one, Miles from Nowhere, is the first release from Inside Out, kind of the first label release. So it kind of brought the attention of kind of a major label here with Inside Out. And you can see why when you listen to it. It's very much in the style of a lot of the artists that are on the Inside Out record label. So it kind of fits right in line with their brand and with the different artists that they have. So I was excited. If they thought this was worthy of signing and bringing and having so much press around and so forth, that definitely piques my interest. And all of the different artists that people were comparing it to are definitely a lot of my favorite artists. So I was really excited to delve into this project. And just as a little bit of a background, I've talked about it on several shows, but if you haven't heard me talk about it yet, I was introduced to prog from my dad. My dad was a big prog fan in the 70s and loved Genesis and Yes and Gentle Giant. That was his kind of three main bands that he really discovered and wanted to share with me. And once I kind of went through their catalog and fell in love with that music, I thought to myself, oh, I've got to find new music that is in the same style. There's such great music. There's got to be something out there where musicians are still playing this style of music. And this was back in early 2000s, and I came across Transatlantic essentially and saw that it was made of several other modern prog bands, and from there kind of got into Spock's Beard and Flower Kings mainly. And those were the bands that I fell in love with and that I consider my personal bands, whereas the Genesis and Yes are my dad's bands. My bands are the Flower Kings and Spock's Beard, because those were the bands I was obsessed with as I was a teenager and really getting into this style of music, and I was hungry for anything that sounded like that. Any band that had any flavor that was similar to those bands, I was just all about. I love their sound, I love that symphonic style, I love the fun and just the willingness to jump into different genres and different styles. There's jazziness, there's more pop elements at times. They can do it all, and I love that variety and all the expression that is available to these artists. And I feel like Jonas Lindberg has pretty much the same influences that I do. He must have grown up loving those bands as well, because that's the style that's on board here. That's the sound that we're going with. And so immediately that captures my attention and is special to me. So if you're a fan of Flower Kings, Spock's Beard, Transatlantic, those style bands, this should be for you, because that's the style that this is in. And to me, that really raised it up, in my opinion, and brought back memories and fond thoughts of the classic days of those bands. So for me, that's a positive. I can see that for some people it could be a negative, that it maybe could sound derivative of those bands. Maybe he's copycatting a little bit too much of the style of Spock's Beard and Flower Kings and Transatlantic. You can even hear little touches here and there that almost feel pulled from certain classic songs from those groups. But to me, I don't mind that, because I think he does put his own individual stamp on the music that puts it in a unique category. Because I've listened to a lot of music that's inspired by those artists, or inspired by Yes and Genesis, even if you're pulling back deeper. And some of the music is just kind of a clone of those artists with no real soul or passion. And that's just not something I'm very interested in. That's something that doesn't work for me, because it's missing an important ingredient that makes those bands special. But I feel like Jonas Lindberg, although he leans heavily on these influences, still brings his own special spark and makes the music more personal and more unique to what he has in his vision. And sometimes what makes things unique to me is the melding of different influences and bringing things from outside arenas that maybe weren't quite what Spock's Beard and Flower Kings did. He's putting a fresh take on it in his own way. I think he puts in a lot of influence from Pink Floyd, obviously. I think there's some pop elements here. I think there's some AOR style elements like Styx and Journey and bands of that ilk. I think you can hear in the makes here. So there's quite a bit of a melting pot here, even if the Spock's Beard Flower Kings influence is so heavy. I think there's enough sprinkled throughout that gives it its own unique character that sets it apart from other clone bands that, of course I'm not going to name names, but different bands that feel like they're copycatting or that they really are leaning on those older styles but without a soul of their own to kind of lend to the music. That's not this. I think this has its own soul, its own feel, its own vibe, and I'm so excited to see what Jonas Lindberg continues to do, because he's obviously in love with the same side of prog rock that I am. So this, in some ways, listening to this, it kind of felt like this is the music. If I was more musically inclined, if I was, really devoted to writing progressive rock music, this would probably be what would come out. This is the kind of music I would probably write and love. So I have a special connection to it from that stance. So I'm a little biased, as you can tell, because this is just my preferred style of music, is the music in this kind of symphonic prog modern lane with pop leanings and melodic vibes to it. That's kind of where my tastes lie primarily. So this is going to connect with me pretty easily. And it's a well-crafted album, and the production is solid, the songwriting is great, just every aspect seems like so expertly done, especially for what I would consider kind of a younger artist. He's really done something very strong here that sounds like it could be done by a very seasoned prog musician, someone like Neil Morse and Royna Stolt. It doesn't sound out of the realm of something they would write, which is really saying a lot, because those are seasoned prog musicians who have albums upon albums of content that they've worked on, and they have so much experience in this prog realm. But he's able to come in as a relative newcomer and do the same kinds of things and have just as much success in some ways. Some of the highlights of the album for me, I love the track Little Man. It's the second track on the album. It's a shorter track compared to a lot of the other big epics on the album, but it's just so well crafted. It has some great acoustic guitar passages, some beautiful melodies. I heard that it was kind of derived from a jam session that Lindberg and one of the band members, Sundqvist, did together. They crafted this out of a jam session, but it doesn't sound like a jam session. It sounds like a very carefully crafted song that's really well done and very thoughtfully created. I just love it. It's a beautiful song. It's a highlight of the record. I love these kind of shorter prog songs that really give you the best of prog, but in a short package. Sometimes that's really a good delivery of prog music for me, because it gives you so much, and you're able to unpack so many things in a relatively short time, and you don't have to sit there and listen to this big sprawling epic. But don't get me wrong, I love the epics as well. That's why I love Summer Queen, which comes next in the track list. I think this is a great crafted epic. It's about 15 minutes long and change. Starts out very Pink Floyd sort of vibe, very atmospheric, before it morphs into this kind of Steve Howe-like acoustic guitar section with some wonderful female vocals from Jenny Storm. Her voice is just really great on this record, and this is probably the best showcase of it. Some great synths come in with a heavy riff all of a sudden. Sundqvist vocals come in with a bit more power. There's this heavier proggy section that comes about. Things get big and grand and epic. Kind of the ending sounds like it could be a big Transatlantic style epic. There's definitely that feel, especially in these epic pieces. There's definitely a little bit of that Neil Morse blueprint. Neil Morse has a very specific way that he constructs his epics, and that is kind of felt in some of these epic pieces, and I think that's felt here for sure. Even the ending sounds very much like The Great Nothing, that kind of piano melody that kind of brings out the song after this big epic conclusion. That kind of brought to mind that Spock Spirit epic. I like Oceans of Time. I like that kind of proggy keyboard riff that's a little bit almost classical sounding in its nature. It's a very addictive riff that really stuck with me after listening to the album. It's one I can even hear in my head right now as I'm talking about it. Just a really classic proggy riff that I think really stands out from the record. Astral Journey, I love this track. It's an instrumental track, but it starts off more acoustic and laid back, but then it gets more intense as you go throughout it. So I like that chill vibe, but it gets more heavy and more instruments come into the mix to add more to the soundscape. It kind of reminds me of the Flower Kings and something they do with some of their instrumental tracks. Even the title, Astral Journey, sounds like it could be a Flower King song, like from Space Revolver or something like that. So really great track. I really love that one. Why I'm Here is a great, fun, bouncy prog pop type piece, kind of similar to like the Spock's Beard, more poppy songs in their early career. Some of the more breezy type songs from albums like Kindness of Strangers, like Strange World or Mouth of Madness, something like that. Has a cool flavor to it, but also packs some interesting progressive flavor into it. So I think that's a great balance of stuff going on in that song. Miles from Nowhere is the big epic at the end, and of course, like I said before, it follows a little bit of the blueprint of what you'd expect from like a Neil Morse written epic, with the big sprawling overture to start, and then it gets into a more poppy kind of acoustic section before it gets into a heavier, darker section, and then it pulls back a little bit more with more acoustic flavor before coming into the grand finale and giving this big epic send-off. This is kind of what you'd expect from a Neil Morse crafted epic, but it's done really expertly here. Like I said, you could argue that is this too derivative? Is this too copycat of some of these other artists? But to me, even though the blueprint is similar, the structural part of it, what's included inside that blueprint is very interesting and varied and keeps my attention, and doesn't really, I don't listen to this constantly and say, okay, that's a piece of that Spock's Beard song, that's a piece of that Transatlantic song. I think I might be giving the wrong impression that this is like, it's not at all that, it's its own unique thing, it's its own flavor. He puts his own stamp into the music, Jonas Lindberg does, but you can definitely hear the influences, if you stop and listen. But there's new things brought into it. There's things that you might not expect from a Neil Morse epic, so it adds variety and interest. And of course this ends with a big Roina Stolt guitar solo to bring that home, that kind of feel that this is inspired by Transatlantic or Flower Kings. You get the actual man who does those epic guitar finales in those albums on the record to do an epic guitar finale, so kind of brings that comparison full circle at the end there. But to me, this album just shows such great promise for a new up and rising prog musician, and it's really exciting to me. Some of the most exciting things for me are discovering new artists, especially young artists who can continue bringing life and vitality into this genre, because I always fear that. I always fear this moment of like when these older prog bands, retire and cease making music. Is prog just going to die? Is there going to be no new prog music? But it's artists like this, like, say Moon Safari, or even like the Deer Hunter and modern bands like that, Thank You Scientists, that kind of give me hope that there's a future for the genre, that it's healthy, that artists are still interested in this music and in bringing varied and interesting music to the forefront, even amongst kind of the pop landscape that gets increasingly less interesting, in my opinion, in a lot of ways. Gets a little bit more homogenized and robotic and not as interesting. You still have artists that care about the integrity of the music, have these influences of these classic bands that they love, and are bringing prog music to the masses into the future. So really an awesome release that I recommend to all fans of these bands that I've mentioned, Flower Kings, Spock's Beard, Transatlantic. This is definitely a must listen for fans of those groups. Hopefully you'll find the unique character that I found in the music and realize that there's a soul and a heart to this music that puts it on another level to just more generic symphonic prog bands that you might find out there that don't have as much character and identity to their own. But I think this does. and I really enjoyed the record. I think there's potential for Jonas Lindberg to continue on and become a big name in the prog world. He could have a masterpiece prog album in front of him if he continues in this style and crafts such carefully constructed epics and great prog music. I think that's more than possible. So thank you guys for listening to my review. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you enjoy the album if you go check it out, or if you've already heard it. Please give your thoughts in the comments if you have heard it, how you feel about it, if you like it like I do, if you think there's a lot of promise here for his future, and just let me know how you feel about my review in general and about the channel. So thank you guys so much. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. I'd love it if you did that, because it would mean a lot to my channel and growing it. And I'm trying so hard to just be a good voice for prog music and give great recommendations and keep this genre alive and keep people talking about it. And that's really my goal here, and to just allow people to keep enjoying the music and see that there's so much great music out there. Sometimes people probably get a little sad at the state of music when they look at the mainstream music world and it doesn't quite look like the classic music that you grew up with, but it's out there if you search hard enough, and I'm trying to bring that out and trying to showcase that to everybody as best as I can. And so hopefully you guys are enjoying that, and I hope you guys are enjoying whatever you're listening to out there. Please feel free to give recommendations to me. I'm always looking for new great music, and I love it when commenters say, check out this album, check out this one. And oftentimes I do, and I really like what I hear. So thank you guys so much, and I hope to catch you guys in another video. Bye.